Hello and welcome back to the channel. In this tutorial, I'll be showing how to make a halter neckline dress. If this is something you're interested in learning or knowing how to make, you want to keep on watching up to the end of the video. I'll be making use of this Ankara print fabric. I have my lining fabric, scissors, chalk, and my measuring tape as well. So these are all the measurements that I will be needing: my bust circumference, my waist circumference, hip circumference, my neck circumference, my shoulder to bust, shoulder to waist, shoulder to hip, and the full length of the garment that we'll be making. So when taking your neck circumference, you basically want to measure around your neckline and put a finger in between your neckline and the tape to give it ease and ensure that it's not too tight. So mine is 15 inches, and these are all the measurements that we will be working with for this tutorial. So to begin, I'm going to mark 8 inches, which is my shoulder width. Half of my shoulder width is 8 inches. Then I am going to mark a border line at the top like I did for the skirt or the lower part. So if you know me, you know I like to mark border lines just so I know where I'm taking my measurements from. So once I have marked 8 inches, which is half of my shoulder, and the border line, I'm going to go ahead and take my body points, which are my shoulder to bust point, my shoulder to under bust, and my shoulder to waist, which is equally the same thing as my shoulder to half length. So for the half length, instead of using 16 inches, I ended up using 17, and that is because of seam allowance to attach it to the lower part and also attach the collar. So I added 1 inch. So the half length for the upper part is currently 17 because of seam allowance. So these are all my body points marked out here. What I'll be doing next is to take half of my bust span measurement. So half of my bust span is 4 inch, but I'm marking 4.5 because of seam allowance, as I said. So I'm going to mark 4.5 inches across those body points that I drew earlier. So that would be to create the dart. So this is 4.5 inches, and the measurement was taken from the center front and not the center back. So from that top line we drew earlier along the shoulder or along the border at the top, I'm going to go ahead and measure 8 inches downwards, which will serve as the armhole. Then I would connect it back upwards to the top line at the border. And this, oh my god, my chalk broke, you guys. Wow. So I'm just going to connect it back up again, and this would be to create the armhole. Do note that you do not need an armhole for this project, but we are going to create an armhole regardless because of the princess darts. So yes, this will serve as a guide when making the princess darts. But first, I'm going to go ahead and make the neckline. So the neckline is 2.5 inches wide. For the front and the back, it's 2.5 inches wide, while the back is 1.5 inch deep and the front is 2.5 inch deep. So what you see me doing right now is making the front neckline first, which is 2.5 inches wide and 2.5 inches deep. Then I'm going to make the back neckline, which is equally 2.5 inches wide but 1.5 inch in depth. So if you've been following me for a long time, you know that I use 1.5 for my back neckline, and that is my standard measurement that I use. After making the neckline, the next step was to create the armhole slope or the armhole curve, which I did off camera. So that would serve as the guide when making the princess dart. Now for the princess dart, I went below my bust line and above my bust line by 1 inch. So from that 4.5 inch mark that we drew earlier, you can see that on the bust span where that line intercepts the bust line, I went above and below it by 1 inch respectively. So what I'm going to do next is to measure the armhole curve or the armhole slope up until the point where that curve meets the upper chest line. Now do note that the upper chest line was 8 inches. That's the 8 inches we measured down from the shoulder. So it meets the upper chest line at 9 inches, and I'm going to divide it by 2, and that is 4.5, and that is what I have marked along the shoulder. Then from that 4.5 inch mark, I'm going to connect it to the 1 inch above the bust line that we just drew. So I marked above my bust line and below my bust line by 1 inch. So I'm just going to connect the marking that goes above the bust line to that 4.5 inch mark that is on the armhole. So now to make the halter neckline, I'm going to connect the neckline width to the armhole. So from that 2.5 inch width for the neckline, I'm going to connect it to the armhole with a line like so. So basically I'm connecting the armhole now to that neckline point. So remember the neckline was 2.5 inches, so that's where the neckline meets the armhole, and that would be what would make the halter neck effect. Okay, so we are no longer using the previous armhole, rather we'll be using this new line that we just drew. After marking out the dart and cutting out the armhole, at the point where the dart intercepts or meets with the armhole, I'm going to extend that by 1 inch, and this is to ensure that the fabric doesn't turn out short when we join the darts. Having done that, the next thing will be to contour the dart, and to contour the dart, I'm going to move over to the dart line that we drew earlier, which is half of my bust span, and mark 1 inch on either side of that line on the waist, on the under bust. So I'm going to mark 1 inch on either side of that line, and this is to contour the dart. So I'm going to mark 1 inch on that line on the waist and on the under bust. Then I would connect it to that 1 inch line I drew below the bust line. Do note, if you don't know how to draft a dart, a basic princess dart or a buste dart, I have detailed videos on the channel on how to do that, and I'm sure that you find it really helpful. I'm going to leave it in the description box. So once I have done that, that would be the dart for this project. So I'm going to go ahead and cut out the neckline just so we can see where we are currently. So this is the back neckline. So next up, I'm going to cut out the front neckline, which is 1 inch deeper than the back neckline. So currently I'm using 2.5 inches for the front neckline. I later went ahead to reduce it to 3.5 because I found 2.5 was too high. You can see the 1 inch extension at the armhole for the dart over here. So next up, I'm going to take my body measurements before cutting out the sides. So when I take my body measurements, I would ensure to replace the measurements for the dart. So a quarter of my bust circumference plus 2 inches for the dart, then extra 2 inches for allowance. So that's what I'm going to mark on my bust, and I'm going to take a quarter of my waist plus 2 inches and replace the 2 inches for the dart as well for the waist area. Once that is done, the next step would be to cut out the dart. So do note that the front dart alone has the contour, while the back dart is just the straight cut that I am making out. So this cut I am making out is on the front pieces and the back pieces, while on the front piece alone I'm going to contour the dart. So remember that 1 each mark we made on either side of the dart line. I'm going to be taking it on only the front plan because of the bust area. So that's basically why we contour the darts for the front. So I'm just cutting off the excess along the length or from the length. Then I'm going to go ahead and cut out the 1 inch on either side of that dart line on the front and cover out the bust area. And that is basically what you see me doing right now. I'm covering out the front dart to create the curve and the front plan for the bust area. So I'm just going to do that on the center front as well as the side front. Like I said earlier, if you do not know how to draft a basic buste pattern or a princess dart pattern, I have detailed tutorials on the channel which I am going to leave in the description box of this very video. Okay, so do check it out. Once I have cut out the dart, the next step would be to notch the zipper allowance on the back. So I'm going to fold that down and create a notch just where right where the center front meets with the center back. I'm going to fold that and create a little notch there, and that would be to enable me know where my zipper allowance stops. Next up, I'm just going to slit that center back into two, just so we have two individual pieces for the center back, or for the back plan rather. I'm just going to slit that into two. So this is what the front plan is looking like. I'm going to lay all the front plan pieces on the table. So this is what the front plan looks like currently. After that, the next step would be to create an opening at the center back. So because this is a halter neck, I would have a collar at the top. It will not look nice to have a zipper run from the collar all the way down. Hence, I'm going to break the zipper allowance. And to do this, I'm going to come down the neckline by 5 inches. So I'm going to go below the neckline by 5 inches. Then from that place where I just drew that 5 inch mark, I'm going to go inwards by 2 inches. So basically 2 inches is the same measurement as my zipper allowance. So if your zipper allowance is 1 inch, 3 inch, 4 inch, so whatever you use for your zipper allowance, you would go in by that. So I'm going to connect that all the way back to the top and cut it out. So what this does is prevents the zipper from going from top to bottom, thereby making it look less awkward or not awkward at all. So that is what we are going to do right now. I'm just going to cut out that marked area from the back pieces, and do note that I'm cutting it out from both back pieces. So I'm cutting it from the left and the right back pieces as well. So once it is cut out, this is what it looks like. So you can see this tiny extension here at the top. So that's where the zipper allowance would stop. So the zipper allowance would stop right there. Then this upper part like this would remain open. So when you place your zipper, or when you install the zipper, so the fabric would be placed like this. Then when you install the zipper, it would look something like this. So you can see that that top area there would be open. So this would look nicer because of the collar, as opposed to having a collar that has a zipper running from top all the way downward. So this is what it would look like at the top of the center back area. I went ahead to cut out all the lining pieces. Then from the front plan, I cut out wording to pad the front plan only. Then all the other pieces I cut out matching lining pieces. For the front, I'm going to iron down the wording onto the wrong side of the main fabric. Then I would go ahead and join the side to the center front by joining the dart. So I'm going to iron this down, then I will join that dart area by 1/2 inch on either side. So I'm just going to go do that now. So the same way I'm going to join the main fabric, I'm going to join the lining fabric. So do note, I'm joining the lining fabric separately and joining the main fabric separately. So I am going to go ahead and join those pieces together, then come back and show you guys what it looks like. This is it once the dart has been joined. You can see how nice and clean it looks. So this is what the dart looks like. When taking the dart, when I get to that upper area along the armhole, I did not join by 1/2 inch, rather I used 1 inch. The reason I used 1 inch is because it is a halter neckline and you don't want to have slacks and opening along that armhole area. So the best way is to make it snug and tight. So I went more in that armhole area than the rest of the dart. So at the lower part of the dart, I used 1/2 inch, but when I got towards the armhole area along that dart, I used 1 inch. Next up, I'm going to join the lining to the main fabric. To do this, I'm going to place it right sides facing, then I'm going to stitch the armhole as well as the sides, then turn it right sides out, then stop stitch the neckline and the base. The reason I'm not turning over the neckline is because it has a collar, and the reason I'm not turning the hem is because they were attached to the skirt later. For the back plan, you can see I turned over the zipper allowance as well as the opening that we made at the center back and the side, but the actual neckline is just stop stitch as well as the base. The base is just stop stitch, and the actual neckline is just stop stitch. As you can see, this is a rough edge, and at the top as well we also have a rough edge because of the collar that will be attaching. Now for the top front piece, you can see that the bottom is top stitched and the neckline is also top stitched. However, the sides and the armhole were turned over using the lining, as you can see. And the reason we did not top stitch, the reason we did not turn over the neckline and the hem is because we were attaching a collar at the top and attaching the waistline of the top to the waistline of the skirts. So this is what the front plan looks like currently. Now the next step would be to attach the waistline of the lower part to the waistline of the upper part, and to do this I'm going to turn them right sides facing, ensuring that the waistlines are placed together right sides facing, and I'm going to stitch from end to end using half an inch. So I'm going to place it like this onto each other so they are right sides facing. So along that waistline area there, I'm going to join by half an inch from end to end. So this would be the complete plan for or the complete piece for the front. So I'm going to do this for the front and do it for the back. For the back, I went ahead to attach a zipper, as you can see. So you can see that little vent opening at the top there. So this is what the back looks like. You can see the zip stops right here, while this top part here is open, and that was why I created that cut at the top initially. So this is what the back is looking like. So after joining the front, I'm going to place it right sides onto the back and join the sides using half of my body measurement from top to bottom. So basically I'll be joining from the armhole all the way to the hem using half of my body measurements. After joining with my body measurements, the next step now would be to create the collar, and this is what the dress looks like after it has been joined on both sides. What we'll be doing next is to make the collar, and to do this we'll be using the neck circumference. So my neck circumference is 15 inches. I'll be adding 3 inches to it, making a total of 18 inches. So when making the collar, I'm going to use a measurement of 18 inches. So when taking your neck circumference, you basically want to place your tape around your neck, then put a finger in between that tape and your neckline on your body, just so it has ease and so the measurement is not too tight. So whatever measurement you get, you are going to add 3 inches to it. So since mine is 18, I'm going to fold my fabric into two like this, as you can see. Fold the fabric into two, then I will divide 18 by 4. So when I divide 18 by 4, it's 4.5 inches. So if I divide 18 by 4, it's 4.5 inches. So that is what I'll be marking out, more like marking out a semicircle, as though I was going to cut out a flare. So I'm going to put my tape there and measure 4.5 along from that sharp edge there, from that folded edge. I'm going to measure 4.5 all the way around, as though I was going to cut out a flare. So I'm going to connect all those points together now. From that line that we just marked out now, the 4.5 inch line, I'm going to go inwards and mark out 2.5 inches. Now the reason I'm using 2.5 inches is to create room for seam and to fold the collar later on. So I'm going to mark 2.5 inch upwards from that 4.5 inch line that we drew earlier. So this is what I am going to do. After marking 2.5 inch around it, I am going to connect all the spots together with a line. Then I would cut it out, and this would be my collar, my fabric collar for this project. So I'm going to cut two pieces of this. So you'll be needing two pieces for this. You can either use the same fabric for the two pieces, or you can use one main fabric and one lining fabric, but I'm going to use the same fabric for both pieces. So this is what the collar looks like. It's a round collar, and I'll be cutting out a second piece which would make the lining, but I'll be using the same fabric to cut out the lining as well. Using the collar that we created earlier as a guide, I cut out a wadding piece that is a little bit shorter at the top and at the bottom, and this would help me stiffen the collar. You can use soft stay or collar stay, whatever you prefer. So I'm going to iron that onto one side of the collar piece. Then I would place the other piece right on top it, right sides facing, and stitch from that end all the way to the other end, just on the smaller circle. So I'm going to stitch from this end all the way to the other end basically, and I'm going to do this after ironing on the wadding onto one side of the collar. So this is what it looks like after it has been stitched. You want to ensure to notch this down so it lays really nicely. So this is a little strap for the button loop. So you basically want to take a strap like this and fold it like this. So this would be what we'll be using to attach the button later. You can see that hole there, so that will be the button loop. So I'm going to take this after placing it onto each other, folding it like this. I'm going to place it in between the two fabric pieces that I cut out earlier, ensuring that you don't have too much inside or too much outside, just the right amount. Then I'm going to stitch down the sides of the collar on both sides. So I'm going to stitch this side down and the other side down as well. After stitching all that together, I turned it right sides out and gave it a good press, and this is what it looks like. I'm basically going to fold it into two halves, so I'm not using the loop as part of the measurement. I'm just folding the collar material into two halves. Then I would notch the middle points along the bottom. I'm going to notch the midpoint, and this would be to create a guide when I begin to attach the collar onto the neckline of the fabric. I would also fold this front neckline into two halves and notch the midpoint as well. So when sewing this, I would align the midpoint on the collar to the midpoint on the front neckline. To attach the collar, I'm going to align those notch points together, the notch point on my collar and the notch point on my fabric. So I'm going to start off from the wrong side of my fabric. Then I will take that part of the collar that does not have the wadding or the stay. Then I would align the notch part on that piece onto the notch part of the neckline on the wrong side of the neckline. Then I'm going to pin it down together to join it and align it. So after pinning it, I went ahead to join it from end to end. Now when joining, you do not want to join from the front, you want to start from the back. So the back edge, you start from there and work your way up to the front. So that's basically how I joined it. Next up, the front part of the collar that has the stay, I went ahead to iron it down just so it's not so difficult to fold the edge together. I'm just going to fold that edge together like this. As you can see, I'm just going to fold in the edges like this, then stop stitch it from end to end. So when top stitching, you actually want to take your time because this is the finishing of your neckline. So I'm going to fold it down and sew from end to end. So do note that when folding, you want to fold in carefully, as well as grip the collar that was attached to the wrong side. So you want to fold in carefully and ensure that there are no rough edges poking out. So this is what it looks like after it has been sewn. It looks really nice, really neat. And this is what the back of the collar looks like. So this is the button loop, as you can see, and this is the other part. So this is where the zipper ends. What I'll be doing next is to attach a button to the opposite side of the collar. That's the side that does not have the button hole. So I'm going to stitch down this button here. You can use any type of button. I couldn't find pearl buttons, so I decided to use this one. So I'm just going to stitch that down. After sewing on the button, I went ahead to try it on, and this is what it looks like. I'm really happy how it turned out, and I'm glad that there's no much cleavage showing along the armhole area. So this is what it looks like. Let me know your thoughts about this in the comment section. Do leave a thumbs up if you enjoyed the video, and subscribe if you haven't subscribed already. And yeah, I'll see you guys in another tutorial. So I was really excited to try on my dress, by the way, and this is the back view, and looks really nice and snug. This is the front view. So let me know your thoughts about this in the comment section. Like, share, subscribe, and I'll see you guys in another video. I really was not able to get full pictures or full videos, but I hope this works. And yeah, I really love my dress. So yeah, until next time, do not forget to subscribe. All right, bye guys.